Want to know what I learned from a billionaire? Well, I'll tell you in just a second. First, welcome to Journey at Home. We are thrilled to have you with us. Thanks so much for being part of this community where we make it simple for you to follow Jesus and live a better life. So if you haven't made our relationship official yet, what are you waiting on? Just hit that subscribe button, all right? Hit that bell for notifications so we can stay connected, because we're all trying to live a better life, and better is going to begin right here. Okay, so a few months ago, I had the opportunity with a few friends to tour Trilith Studios, which is right outside of Atlanta. Now, Trilith is where many of the Marvel movies and shows have been filmed. But when I toured it, the 31 sound stages they have there were all empty because of the writers and actors strike. The owner of the studio spent a little bit of time with us. He was losing millions of dollars every single day. But I remarked to a friend that when we met him earlier in the day, he didn't seem stressed at all about it. Matter of fact, he was using the shutdown as an opportunity to invest millions more into construction right there at his complex. And that's when my friend looked at me and he said, "Matt, that guy is worth $9 billion. You do not need to worry about a few million when you got that much money." And I realized I do not think like a billionaire at all. My thinking's way smaller than that. But it was a great lesson that I have not forgotten. See, how you see impacts what you do. Because I saw that situation from a scarcity mindset, I focused on the fears of the lost revenue and focused on the fears of the uncertain future. This billionaire, he saw that situation from an abundance mindset. He was not worried about running out of resources, so all he saw was opportunity to reinvest and create something better for the future. Now, whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, we've all got a particular way that we see the world, and that view impacts what we do. So I wonder, which mindset do you carry with you? This is the final episode of our series, Love Money in the American Way, where we are discovering the leverage point that leads to lasting happiness in life. Now, a leverage point is a place in a system where one change can lead to a significant and positive impact on the entire system. In other words, you improve one thing, it improves everything. So, if you could change one thing in your life that you were confident would make your life better, that would make you happier, what are you going to change? The American answer to that is always to gravitate towards changing love, the quality of relationships, or we want to change money, how much we make, save, or spend. And again, if you don't follow Jesus, that approach makes a lot of sense. What else are you left with as a leverage point to try to improve? But Jesus taught that the greatest leverage point for happiness is our trust, because the object of your trust always determines the outcome of your life. Who you trust will determine how happy you are, because who we trust shapes the kind of relationships we have with each other, and who you trust determines how you view and manage and interact with your money. So today, I want us to wrap up by getting above all the emotion. Let's get above all the day-to-day decisions around our money and our stuff, and just talk about this for a minute from a broader point of view. Specifically, if you could have a personal conversation with Jesus, how do you think he would see money and possessions? Well, Luke actually answers this question for us because he recorded a parable Jesus told his friends as Jesus was trying to help them look at their life and look at their money differently. Now, if you're not familiar with this, a parable is a type of a made-up fictional story that Jesus often told when he was trying to help people have a breakthrough in their thinking. So here's how this one went. Jesus said, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So you got a guy in the story who's wealthy enough, he actually needs somebody else to handle all his financial affairs. And he discovers that this manager he's paying to invest and protect his assets is actually wasting them. So he does what any of us would do. Jesus says, he calls him in and he asks him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management because, well, you can't be manager any longer. The depth of the problem is still a mystery to this owner, right? But he's about ready to conduct a full audit. And once he finishes getting all the info, well, this manager's out of a job. He's being fired, and rightly so. Now, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you knew you were getting fired, but if you have, well, you know where your mind goes pretty quickly. You start asking questions like, how am I going to eat and live indoors? I got to find a way to get another job so I can pay my bills. Well, that's what happens with this dishonest manager. In the story, the manager says to himself, well, what shall I do now? My master's taken away my job. And then he says, I'm not strong enough to dig. I'm ashamed to beg. Then he goes, oh, I know what I'll do so that when I lose my job here, people are going to welcome me into their houses. So this guy realizes, I've just got a little bit of time and a little bit of opportunity. The clock's ticking. There's a lot of urgency. Before I lose my job, I need to leverage my time and my opportunity to set myself up to be in a good place in the future. And it makes me chuckle a little bit because he admits, besides, I'm a white-collar guy. I'm way too weak for manual labor. I'm too proud to beg. So what can I do to leverage my little bit of time, my little bit of opportunity, and create a better future for myself? And in the story, Jesus says he called in each one of his master's debtors, people who owed his master money. And he asked the first one, how much do you owe my master? Well, 900 gallons of olive oil. And the manager told him, okay, take your bill, sit down quickly, and let's change that to 450. To which I'm sure the guy was like, what? Well, yeah, the owner's not been watching the books. He doesn't know what different people owe him. So this money manager realizes, I can cut this guy's debt in half. He will love me. My boss will be none the wiser for it. To which you might go, well, that's wrong. Well, yeah, but this money manager's already proven he's dishonest, so he doesn't care, okay? And then, Jesus says, he asks the second guy who owed his master money, how much do you owe? Well, 1,000 bushels of wheat. He said, okay, let's take it, let's change it, let's make it 800. Now, most of us read this and we think, well, that's terrible. When the boss finds out what he's done, it's going to get ugly in a hurry. Well, in this made-up story, the boss does find out because word always gets around eventually, right? But Jesus was a master at telling stories, and things in his stories never went quite as expected. And so he tells us that the master, when he finds out, he commended the dishonest money manager because he had acted shrewdly, to which we all go, what, he commended him? Yeah, when the owner finds out, he calls the manager in, he pats him on the back, he chuckles a little bit, and he says, golly, you're one shrewd dude. To which I'm sure the manager would have been like, wait, you're not mad? And he goes, well, yeah, I'm a little mad. That was my money, but the amount of money you stole from me isn't going to break me. Besides, I see what you were doing. You saw you were about to be jobless and left on the street. So you took this a little bit of time and opportunity that you had left with my money, and you leveraged it to create a better future for yourself. You cut some deals for some guys, knowing it was going to buy you a job or earn you some favors. It's pretty smart. Now, if that has you scratching your head confused, well, this isn't going to help any. Jesus adds to the story this perspective. He says, for the people of this world, in other words, people who don't follow Jesus, are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light, people who follow God. Now, remember, Jesus is talking to his disciples. He's talking to his closest followers, some of his best friends here, people who believe in eternity. And he says, do you realize that people in this world who do not make any decisions in light of eternity, they're not worried about that? Do you realize they are way more shrewd, way wiser than those of you who actually believe there's more to life than just this life? Because they know how to take this little bit of time they have on earth, and they know how to leverage it for their future here. They know how to make themselves prosperous here. And those of you who believe everybody lives forever somewhere, Jesus' point is you need to take a page out of their playbook. You need to learn a lesson from this dishonest manager. And then as his disciples are looking around at each other confused, like, we don't get it, Jesus explains what he means. And this is where the story gets personal for you. It's where it gets personal for me if we're followers of Jesus. What Jesus does here is he gives us a brand new filter through which to see our world and every bit of money and possessions that are a part of it. Here's what he says. He says, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it's gone, you're going to be welcomed into eternal dwellings. In other words, he goes, I want you to see the world from a much bigger perspective than just the 80 or 90 or 100 years that you're going to live here. I want you to view everything you do in light of eternity. So you use the money and your possessions you've got. All the money and possessions Jesus would say that I put in your hands. I want you to use it to make an impact here. Well, how do you use temporary money to make an eternal impact? Well, simple. This is not complicated. You invest your temporary money into eternal things. So let me ask you, what is eternal? Well, God's purposes are eternal. His church is eternal. People are eternal. So Jesus says when you see the world from an eternal point of view, you're going to use money in ways that have an eternal payoff. And when you get to eternity, you'll be welcomed by people whose lives were impacted by what you did with God's money that He put in your hands. Matter of fact, He goes on, Jesus said, whoever can be trusted with very little, well, they can also be trusted with much. And whoever's dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you've not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, well, who's going to trust you with true riches? If you've not been trustworthy with somebody else's property, who's ever going to give you property of your own? Now, if that makes you a little uncomfortable, probably should. It makes me a little uncomfortable. Because according to Jesus, all of us who follow Him, we're all going to give an account of how well we managed everything He's given us, which means God's paying attention to what we do with our worldly wealth. Why? Well, because there's a far more valuable type of wealth that apparently He wants us to have. It is the true riches of eternal wealth. Now, I'm going to be honest, I can't entirely explain what that is, but I know this. It's greater than any wealth we can have here. But if we can't follow His purposes with our money now, then Jesus says you can't be trusted to enjoy true riches there. So what you do with your money today actually impacts what you enjoy in eternity. All right, so let me summarize what Jesus taught us about how we're supposed to see our money. Jesus said it's a tool and a test. Money's a tool to invest in what will outlast us, and it's a test to prove we're ready for greater riches and responsibilities. So let me give you two questions that I would encourage you to think about. Ask yourself, am I using my money as a tool to invest in things that are going to last forever? So just take an audit of your money and your possessions and figure out what percentage of it is having an eternal impact. And then the second question is this: will I pass the test of managing well what God's given me? Because again, we don't own it, we're just the managers. So when God asks to see the books one day, are you going to be excited to show Him what you did with what He's given you? Now, let me just go ahead and say what most of us are thinking. We all tend to think, hang on, if I do that, I am never going to have any fun anymore. I'll never have money for stuff. Apparently, I can never have a new car. I'll never go on that trip. I'll never. No, listen. Here's what you got to understand. That is scarcity thinking. God is 1 billion times bigger than the billionaire I talked to. Everything in the world's His. Do you think He's worried about providing what you need if you put money into His purposes? Do you think He's sweating it when there's a down economy or a writer's strike or a layoff at work? Of course not. I mean, that stuff is a rounding error on His balance sheet. The truth is, Jesus says, I'll give you everything you need when you manage my stuff my way. And I'm going to instruct you to enjoy some of it along the way. That's what He promises. So if you could just see the world from Jesus' seat, I think you'd stop worrying. I think I'd stop clinging to my stuff. I think we'd stop obsessing. I'll tell you what I'd do. I'll tell you what I think you'd do. The first thing you'd do every time you got money is you'd figure out how to give some of it. And every year you'd try to keep stretching your giving bigger and bigger because you were seeing that as an investment into eternity with a massive return. And you'd start looking around your apartment or you'd start looking around your house going, how could I use this extra car? Or how could I use my boat? Or how could I use this collection I've got? How can I use this stuff that God's allowed me to accumulate? How could I use some of it to help other people for the sake of His kingdom? You know, I could take the money from that and really make an impact. God, is that what you want me to do? I think that'd be the question we'd be asking. And a lot of the time He might say, no, I'm not asking you to give that away. You just keep that for now. But every now and then, He would say, yeah, why don't you sell that? Or why don't you use that money for something eternal? But you would sell it with a grin on your face. And when people say, well, what happened to, whatever the thing was? You'd go, oh, I sold it. But hey, let me tell you about this orphanage. Or let me tell you about this ministry or this nonprofit. Or let me tell you about these kids. Suddenly you would have an entirely different kind of joy. Because there is no joy in consumption. There's not even lasting joy in collection, is there? But there is incredible joy when you invest your money and possessions into God's eternal purposes and you make a difference in people's lives. Love, money, The American way, it doesn't deliver that kind of joy, happiness, or freedom. And it sure doesn't deliver that kind of return on investment. So the question is, who are you going to trust to live this one life you've been given to live? You going to trust yourself as a guide? Are you going to trust what everybody else is saying and doing around you? Or are you going to trust Jesus to guide you? The object of your trust will determine the outcome of your life. How you see impacts what you do. And let me remind you, you only get one shot at it. So if you want to be happy, would you just trust His direction for your relationships and your money? No one who's ever done that fully has regretted it. You certainly won't either.